Outer Goldie Station was in utter chaos. The Hakstra Incident, a disastrous strategic miscalculation, had just escalated into a full-blown interstellar war when a diplomatic escort ship opened fire on what they thought to be pirates. The minor races of the Orion Alliance, which had been fracturing over the course of 2 centuries, were in full-blown panic at the prospect of total war with the Cygnus Federation. In a desperate bid to control the situation, station security implemented martial law, keeping all ships in dock and every soul on the station resigned to quarters for half the day. A suffocating silence descended upon the station as the many smells of sentients were replaced with stale air. Corridors that were once a constant bristle of trade and the daily goings of a million sentient beings now only saw the traffic of security patrols and the occasional arrested dissident. The only other sounds were the constant hum of the air scrubbers. Among them were a single human crew staying in the Drunken Steps bar and inn. The inn, if one could truly call the measly collection of half-broken sleeping pods an inn, was the cheapest place the human crew could find when the sudden announcement blared on the speakers, declaring the onset of the war. Or maybe they picked that place because they were already getting hammered on the cheap booze. They were a simple freighter crew, neither bodyguards nor truly merchants and certainly not fighters. Their ship, Finn's Hopper, was an old rust bucket armed with 2 small missile bays, only one of them functional, and a single self-defense turret. Like most sentients on the station, the crew had nothing better to do with their plentiful time than passively watch the news. They were chatting amongst themselves over a 3rd round of drinks when the news came in. A young colony world had been hit in a sudden fleet push by the Cygnus, and casualties were high. The Cygnus had decided the world was a security threat, or somehow contributing to the logistics of their enemy, or not worth spending resources to secure and maintain, or just a stain on their scanners. Either way, they decided to immediately sterilize any major or minor population center on the planet from orbit, using the least effort they could manage, which turned out to be a wide dispersal meson beam from the main cannons of the warships, except they set it a bit too wide to achieve immediate, or actual sterilization. A hush fell over the station, all eyes glued to a screen. All sentients were familiar with war, but none on the station had anticipated that war would come to their doorstep this far into the core territory of the Alliance, which was now a real possibility. As the deafening silence broke into a piercing cacophony, the crew of Finn's Hopper shared a collective look before shifting their gazes to their captain, Finn. As his crew looked to him for answers, Finn slowly looked to the news screen, its horrifying contents stealing his resolve. He closed his eyes softly, taking a second to compose himself. As he opened his eyes, a fire was lit behind his steely irises. He looked across his crew seated in front of him, each returning his stare with a deep and resolved fire of their own, and he stood. As he exited the bar, his crew got up as one and followed their captain wordlessly. In the muted glow of the station's corridor, Finn led his crew with a newfound purpose, each step echoing their silent vow. Security would stand in their path, appendages held high to stop them, but each would step aside as their wavering wills were met by unyielding resolve. As Finn's crew got to their ship, they immediately initiated undocking procedures, getting the ship dry-started as fast as was possible without overloading the cold power conduits. They fired up the anti-gravity field and nudged their ship out of the void bay slowly, passing the atmospheric shield and exiting the station proper. By then, word was spreading of the new upstart race abandoning the station to flee back to their backwater planet as soon as possible, and word had indeed reached the station master. Hoping to restore order and his frayed authority, the station master contacted his traffic control officer and gave him a simple order. Do not let that ship leave the immediate area of the station, and threaten them with backbreaking fines if they don't return immediately. The traffic control officer sat down in a comms chair for the first time in a decade of his career. He licked his mandibles and spoke into the mic. Attention vessel bearing XC-4729, civilian freighter Finn's Hopper. This is Chief Traffic Controller Scrixol Venth of Outer Goldie Station. You are in violation of the Alliance Traffic Regulation 835 regarding unauthorized vessel movement during declared emergencies. The station is in total lockdown. You will return to dock immediately or face a significant fine. Finn looked at his comm screen with a look of disgust, as if something unpleasant had crawled across it before thumbing his broadcast icon. "This is the warship Finn's Hopper. Be advised, traffic control, that we are no longer under your jurisdiction as per Article 1632 of the Alliance Founding Charter, as we are a warship heading for war." Scrixall stared at his screen for a few seconds, trying to decide if he had the wrong ship up on screen, as the piece of junk he was supposed to speak to clearly wasn't a warship by any definition. "XC-4729, I repeat. You are in violation of Regulation 835, and you are listed as a, civilian freighter with minimal functional weaponry. You will return to the station dock immediately, or a fine of 2 million galactic bonds will be levied on each member of your crew, as well as a fine of 20 million bonds on the vessel itself." Finn gritted his teeth as he pushed down on the comms icon again, more forcefully this time. "Traffic control, we are an armed ship heading to war, and as such meet the definition of a warship as per Alliance Traffic Regulations 3219. Out. XC-4729, you are not a registered warship. If you do not immediately turn off your engines and return to dock, we will be forced to increase the fine by—" With a snarl, Finn mashed the broadcast icon with his fist. "Traffic control, you can levy whatever damn fine you want pending collection upon return. We are headed to the Orion Cygnus front to make whatever sacrifice is needed to keep our civilians safe. Godspeed, and pray that we succeed in keeping the war far away from here. Warship Finn's Hopper, over and out." Finn gave his pilot a curt nod, and the ship fired its thrusters on full, as it shot away from the station at high speed as the Alcubierre drive spooled up. Scrixall just sat back in his chair, forearms down by his sides. The fine he had just threatened with was much more than he estimated the ship that had just left was worth. It was certainly more than it would be able to bring in its lifetime as a freighter, not to speak of acting as a mercenary ship, which he doubted would even turn a profit. He shook his head and tapped the screen in front of him, registering the fine with the station database to be collected when the ship returned to the region. Across the Alliance, many such stories of human ships and crews defying order under threat of fines, imprisonment, or acts of violence emerged in the first few weeks of the conflict. Known as the Fiery Fleet, their willingness to take extreme risks to ward off the Cygnus fleet elements and run dangerous cargo runs to supply isolated Alliance positions under blockade turned the tide of the early engagements of the conflict. This gave the Orion Alliance the time needed to mobilize their navies and armies. And, just as with Finn's Hopper, most of these fines were never collected.